All right, you got your notebook? Okay. All right. Well, Instructor Nate, did you have anything to say or anything before we get started?
No, not really.
Okay. You safe and all of that good stuff?
But
I say, are you safe and well and all of that good stuff?
yes, I am. Thank you for asking.
Okay. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
All right. So, as we promised last week, we're gonna get started with the four natural enemies. Um, so, I know Lovely had stated them last week, but does anybody remember what the first natural enemy was?
It was fear.
Yeah, perfect. Did you look it up or you just remember from last week?
I put it down in my notes from last week, so I was kind of cheating.
Oh no, that's good. That's good. All right. So yeah, that is actually the first one. The first natural enemy is fear, and I'm sure we can see and understand why that is. Fear paralyzes and imprisons you, and it basically stops you from taking the necessary action that you need to take. Um, Fear is also a natural response. Significant learning challenges our existing beliefs and understanding. So you can see how when you learn something new and it kind of challenges what you already believe is true, it can be a fearful experience. It can be frightening to some people to have their beliefs challenged. And I'm sure most of us, like millennials, can attest to it and also relate because a lot of us grew up, in very religious households, and then we, started learning things about religion and origins of religion and, other religions, so to speak, who actually have the same story and all of that kind of stuff. So, that could be a fearful experience for some people to have their beliefs that they have grown up with challenged, and that's just one example. Um, is religion, but there are plenty of other examples. And learning something important is existentially terrifying because it threatens the very existence of who you, uh, the very existence of you as you conceive yourself. Um, yeah, the very existence of you as you conceive yourself. So, we have this idea of who and what we are, and when you learn something new, it now challenges that notion of who you know yourself to be and who and what you stand for. So, um, that's another piece of it that can also be frightening or fearful to some people. And we have acronym for fear, which is false evidence appearing real. I'm sure most of you have heard of that, but a lot of times fear comes from not being in the present. So, you're in the past being or thinking about something that has already happened, or living in the future with thinking about something that could happen and not being present. So, a lot of times that's also what fear or false evidence appearing real comes from, is not being present. So, to conquer the first enemy, which is fear, you have to not be afraid to learn and grow, and more importantly, be in action regardless of how you feel. Feelings and emotions are there to keep you safe. And I know we talked about it in prior classes on prior calls, but a lot of the emotional responses and feelings that we have are put in place to keep us safe from threats that don't really exist anymore. So as we said before, this is the most, non-threatening time to be in. Really, you have food, you have water, you have a, roof over your head, you have air conditioning and heat, and all of the amenities. So your survival is not necessarily directly threatened on a daily basis. So a lot of fear is unsubstantiated, and it's just is not real, and it's programming carried over from the obstacles that our ancestors had to face. So just the recognition and realization of the old programming now allows you to overcome that fear. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the first natural enemy, which is fear? Does it make sense? Not make sense?
When you say fear, is there to protect us, do you mean in a way like we are we use that to wait, let me try to I'm trying to put my word I mean I'm putting my words together. Do you mean that we don't take many risks because the fear is there, so that's why it's there to protect us, or like in another way?
That's actually a very great observation, because that is exactly what it means. So as we talked about before, that they did a survey of people, and they asked people what was the number one fear, and the number one fear was public speaking. You would think the number one fear would be death, but it was actually public speaking. And people fear public speaking, as I told you guys before, is because of the eyes staring at you. So, back, in whatever days where people lived outside and not in houses, if you were walking on, the plains of sub-Saharan Africa and you saw a bunch of eyes looking at you, it was probably predators looking for prey. So that fear response and seeing those eyes, incited a fight or flight physiological response that allowed you to run away from that threat. And in turn, you running away allowed you to survive. So it was beneficial in that it allowed our ancient ancestors to survive, to pass on those genes, but at the same time in their survival, they now passed on that particular response to us as well. And those circumstances that incited that fear in them don't necessarily exist for us. And so a lot of the feelings and emotions that we experience are there as carryover for our survival. And us as human beings, we run towards pleasure and we run away from pain. So our feelings and emotions, if something is negative, it's a response to the brain and the body to say, I don't like that thing, so let me not do it. And a lot of those things that are negative feelings and emotions stop us from now taking action. So people say, I don't like public speaking, I don't like to be put on the spot, or, I freeze, and those types of things. Now, just think about the gifts that you don't get to share with the world because you allow fear to stop you, to stand in the way, and not allow you to do what's necessary. So, a lot of people do that. Just think, if that fear factor wasn't there, how many more people would be singers and actors and, poets and any of that kind of stuff. But we just don't do it because we allow fear to stop us. So that was a great observation.
Instructor Keith, this is Bird. I had a question.
Hmm.
I mean, what do you think the role? We all understand that we develop these fears as natural responses to keep us safe, based on the environment. So the role that society plays. I wonder, do you feel that there's a correlation in the censorship, the social censorship, and people's fear of speaking in public?
Definitely, but I would say more so their censorship increases fear because they don't allow the truth to be shared widely. Um, so in them censoring, they uh, they stop the truth from being shared. So as you see, if you watch the news, if you just scroll on social media, like a lot of that type of stuff only allows the negative things to be highlighted. So they want you to be scared. They want you to hide out. They don't want you to know the truth about who you are and the real power that you have inside. And so yeah, I mean that's what they do. That's part of their role because remember, in us being fearful, now we look for an external savior, and in their system of things, them being the external savior now benefits them and is detrimental to us. So the more we can rely on self and do for self, the less we need them. So um, yeah,
Thank you. Thank you.
yeah, no problem. Any other questions about fear? Questions, comments? All right, Emerson, you got the next one?
Yeah, I got the next one. It's clarity.
Yep. Um, do you have any idea of why clarity would be a natural enemy?
Maybe if you don't have clarity, you could have a false idea of yourself or the environment you live in. It could be detrimental to you.
A good guess. Anybody else got any guesses as to how clarity can be a natural enemy?
I guess maybe because if clarity comes with ego, it can lead to a stagnant thought process where you don't, you feel like you have things figured out, so you don't need to keep searching for answers or going deeper inside yourself.
Perfect. Yeah, that's it right there. So clarity limits. Clarity can make you rash and overconfident, and that's exactly what both of you guys said. Um, you know, if you think you have something, if you know it to be so, then you don't have the drive to improve or to look for something greater because you have it, you know it. And that's probably the biggest piece as to why clarity is a natural enemy because, you know, us recognizing it as a natural enemy, now we know that it's an illusion. Clarity is false. You know, what's true today may not be true tomorrow, and we see that all the time in the discipline. We'll tell you one thing like, "Hey, you need a point of balance to be powerful," and then tomorrow we'll say, "Throw a point of balance in the garbage. You don't need it. You could be powerful without point of balance." So those types of things happen all the time, and you know, so and clarity is overcome by having patience and measuring carefully before taking new steps. So Basically just all of what we said is that clarity is fleeting, it's temporary, and don't get caught up in the things that you know because what you know today may be false tomorrow. So, always keep that eye and mind of discernment and, walk in patience and always be a student at all times. Even our grandmaster, he is definitely always a student. He never believes that he has this. Even now after teaching for over 50 years, teaching for 51 years, he's still learning, and the discipline is still unfolding in him. And even in his 70s. So it's like, if he still has a ways to go, if the discipline is still unfolding in him after 50 years, all we have is a drop in the bucket as far as, knowledge and this discipline is concerned. And another thing about it is that this discipline is alive. So it's always transforming. So whenever you think you have it, it just morphs into something else and something else. So, recognize that clarity is fleeting. All right. Anybody? Questions, comments? Make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. Hold on one second. All right. Emerson, you got the next one?
Yep, I got power.
Okay. How is power a natural enemy?
Mm, I kind of say it would closely relate to clarity. The more power you may attain, you might not, number one, look for more, or number two, you might become overconfident or use it to for not godly means.
That's definitely a good guess. Terry, you got anything for us?
I'll follow up with that and say very similar to clarity. We actually learned that in our class on Saturday with the white belts. Um, how thinking you're so sure of a certain path or a certain decision or having so much confidence in a certain way that you lose sight that it's not just about you. It's a grand scheme of things. So you can become a little arrogant, and that can, throw you off track of the principles and the discipline.
Definitely a good guess. Anybody else? All right. Nobody else. So power fixes to illusions. If you can overcome the fear, see through the fog of clarity, you will achieve power. And one thing I want you all to notice is that all of these stack on each other. And once you overcome fear, then obtain clarity. And once you uh, overcome clarity, then you know, achieve power. So they all kind of like stack on each other, kind of like a ladder. um, a person who has power knows when to take risk and how to make rules. Their perceived invincibility can make them cruel and callous, a slave to their own power, which insists it must grow. And that's the crux of power, is that once you achieve so-called power, now you want more and more and more and more. And it's a thirst or trishna that we talked about last week, but that longing that can never be satisfied. You always want more and more and more. And, you know, even if we look at the president, just today, like I was looking at the stock market, and the stock market was up yesterday and today, and then all of a sudden he said, you know, I'm not giving any more stimulus until after I win the election in November. And that just shows you that you're at the so-called highest office in the United States, but yet you hold this thing, this fictional currency over people until you win the next election, knowing that we are in a global pandemic and people need money to eat and pay rent and all of that kind of stuff. So it just goes to show, like, once you have that perceived power, it's a thirst that can never be filled. um, yeah. To conquer this enemy, you must realize that power was never really yours in the first place. At best, you are a conduit or a vessel for power to flow through you. You must handle it carefully. When you know how and when to use this power, that is the key to defeating this enemy. So, yeah, that's basically it on power. Anybody got any questions, comments, concerns? Everything makes sense?
When you said that, it just made me think of, that power is not yours. It's like power is about as much ours as air is.
Exactly right. Yeah, and that's the piece of it too. And as you can see, like, the underlying theme of all of these is also ego, because fear is like, I have to protect this thing that is me, which is ego. Clarity, I know this thing. Power, I have this thing. So it's all about, the I and the ego and being separate from everything else. And that's a piece of it. That realization and recognition that power was never yours to begin with. So you also see how a lot of these things are illusions too, in that, you think that you are powerful and you have this power, but at the end of the day, it's not yours to begin with. Power, the best that you can, possibly achieve is to be a conduit for power, but you can never contain or control power because it's not yours to control and to begin with. Power decides who it goes to and through. So it's not your decision anyway. And if you think it is, that's ego.
That make a lot of
Anybody else?
sense to me. Like, it reminds me of, even though, like, if we're talking in a fictional sense, a lot of times in, like, movies where people have power and they continuously do everything they can to achieve more power, they end up losing everything in hindsight because, again, like you said, it's that ego and wanting more and more and more and more and more. Even and comparing to, like, the president, you in the highest position that you can be in, but you want more power. And in the end, to me, that always ends up crashing down because, like you said, it's not yours to begin with. And so, us and our egos are our natural enemy, and being that they are one and the same, ego and power and clarity and fear, it all ends up crashing down when it's all said and done. If we allow that ego to take over us and allow that power to control us, because we want to control it, but it doesn't. We don't control it.
Exactly. And if you guys want a good, visual representation, it's a movie called The Dark Phoenix. And it's part of X-Men, but it's a very, very great visual representation of the inability to harness or control power. And it
Absolute
speaks
power
as a
corrupts.
Yeah, I got a comment on that right there. because we hear these things about power corrupting absolutely and absolute power, which I think are just two concepts that we really don't have. But I wonder why we have that association that power corrupts absolutely when you can look at ancient civilizations and see that there was powerful people all around, they weren't corrupt. I think that is that do you believe in that adage, Instructor Keith, that power corrupts absolutely, or absolute power corrupts absolutely?
I'll let Instructor Nate take that one because he was the one who was about to say it.
Yeah, Instructor Nate, did you hear what yeah, did you?
Yes, I did. And
Okay.
it goes back to Instructor Keith was talking about how we are conduits of power. Those that know how to use that power and in its proper place realize that that power is not theirs, so they utilize it. Create those ancient civilizations, those powerful techniques that we talk about all the stuff that they used to do that has been lost. They're not actually seeking to make themselves powerful. They're just seeking to use that power in its proper place so that they can make them, if that makes sense.
Yes, Brother Nate, thank you. I'm in accordance.
You're welcome, Brother Bird.
Perfectly stated.
Yeah, I have a question about power. So like, I mean, many people might say he has a lot of power, but many people might say that he doesn't have a lot of power, depending on like what you consider as power. So, is there a true definition of power, or you feel me, is it just up to everybody's consideration?
A lot of that was like very choppy and it sounded very robotic. Could you repeat that one more time? I didn't hear who you was talking about.
All right, all right, can y'all hear me now?
Yep, go ahead.
All right, I was saying, it's power because you feel me. Some people might say that Trump has a lot of power, and some people might not, depending on who you are. So, is power based on your everybody's discernment, or how do you define power?
All right. So a short definition of power is your your ability to make a statement or a declaration and the time that it takes for that thing that you stated or manifested, that thing that you stated or declared to manifest. So the smaller the amount of time that it takes, the more power you have. I'm not sure if you caught that. But if you say or declare something, the time that it takes for that thing to actually manifest is power. And
Hmm.
the less time that it takes, the less power you have. The less time that it takes, the more power you have. And the greater the time that it takes, the less power you have.
Got it. Got it. That makes sense.
That reminds me, Instructor Keith, of the African mythology and cosmogony about how in the beginning there was the word, in Ptah, and even in the Old Testament, uh, the God spoke and all things came into existence. How you talked about, because I never heard that, that breakdown of power. So that was a beautiful breakdown.
Oh yeah, thank you. And that's really what it comes down to because if you look at everything in existence comes from a thought. And what is a thought but a word or a picture? And if it's a picture, it's still a word. So that's what it is. Anybody else? Questions, comments? Everything making sense so far? And this, that definition too, and that understanding is also another. notch in the belt of why meditation is important. Because, I'm going to just share it with you first on this call. So this is my first time speaking it out loud. But in my reflection, either today or yesterday, I even wrote a note in my phone, but it came to me that part of why we're here on earth is to learn to control our thoughts. And you do that through meditation, loosely stated. And I say that because us in this, third dimension, this is one of the only dimensions that has the element of time. Time doesn't exist everywhere. So we come or are incarnate on this particular earth plane, and in this earth plane we have time. And when you think a thought or you say a word or you make a declaration, there is time in between when you say or speak that thing and when whatever you say or declare manifests, right? And we just talked about when you lessen the time, now you increase your personal power. Whereas when you go to other dimensions or when you transcend this particular space-time dimension, the time element is not present. So as soon as you think a thought, you create it in, right then and there. And that time element isn't there. So if you don't have control over your thoughts and you go into those dimensions where you can now instantly create, it'll be chaos. So part of why you are incarnate on earth is to be able to control what you think. So when you do transcend to those higher dimensions, now you have control over your creative abilities in the creative process. And it just hit me. Yeah, I even wrote a note in my phone. Like, yeah, that's part of this whole thing. That's part of why we're here. So, anybody can steal that if you want. If somebody asks, like, what's your purpose here on earth? That could be one answer.
Stole.
That's
You're not stealing and borrowing.
Right. It's not mine anyway.
Instructor. All right,
Yep,
so
go ahead.
first off, that was a whole gem, and I'm like mind blown. Okay, so and you saying that, I don't remember his name, but you just talked about him a few weeks ago in class, and he talked about different times, and he said that he's been to multiple dimensions, and he talked about Earth for one, and how we are here to, if I'm not mistaken, the same reason that you said, which is to control our thoughts and emotions, I believe. And if you fail, you have to keep living this life again on Earth, just in as a different person. Is that the same thing that you experienced, or um that you think is it related to the same thing that he said? If you can remember who
Oh,
I'm talking about.
yeah, I was gonna say it seems like that would come down to two people. I don't remember specifically, but one person is George King, and his thing is being able to control energy. That was his thing. So, being able to, he said the sole purpose of being incarnated on Earth is to learn how to raise the Kundalini energy up the spine and bring it back down again. And he said, once you do that, now you basically are enlightened and you don't have to incarnate on this plane again. You have escaped the will of samsara. And the other person, obviously, is the Buddha. I know we, often talk about him, and that's where, this eightfold path and, the Four Noble Truths come from. And that's, that is definitely part of his message, but not said in that way. And, like we said last week too, it's three paths inside of the eightfold path, and it's the path of wisdom, the path of morality, and the path of meditation. And so when you enter into the path of meditation, that's definitely a part of it as well, being able to control your thoughts, feelings, and emotions. But the piece that came to me was the ability to control it for creation purposes when you do move into those higher dimensions. Um, because there are evidence, and if anybody, wants to see or read the evidence, I can show you. But there are dimensions in which another great example of um, a um, a real life tangible, visual of what I'm talking about is Inception. So when they were in the dream world, they could create out of pure, from directly from the subconscious. And I see your comment too, Lovely. This call is being recorded, so I'll definitely share the recording for anybody who needs to see it. But in Inception, they created inside of dreams, so they used the dream space to create. And part of his commentary was that you only know that it's a dream when you wake up. And so Inception is a dream within a dream within a dream. It's three levels down inside of a dream. And they asked what exists at that level, and he said pure subconscious creation. Like you can create anything you want just out of your own mind. And these types of dimensions actually do exist, and I can show you evidence if anybody wants to see that. But yeah, that was just a realization that came, was that you have to be able to control your thoughts, because once you get to those different realms and dimensions, you are now responsible for what you create. And one of the oldest Hebrew texts, which actually predates the Kabbalah, is called the Sefer Yetzirah, and that translates or transliterated over into the book of creation. And they talk about how, just using words and different spells, incantations, they created beings, what we would consider golems. So, and that was in one of the oldest Hebrew texts. So, several examples, but I don't know. I feel like I went on a tangent.
No, I'm glad you said that because
It was
I had a
great.
dream last. I had a dream last night, and I woke up this morning. I had did something in the dream where I'm like, bro, I don't think I would have done that in person. I was kind of thinking to myself this morning for like 30 minutes, like, wow, like you can really do anything in your dreams, like anything. So it's just crazy that you just brought that up. I'm kind of shook a little bit.
That's how it worked. Somebody else had a question or a comment? Seemed like two people was talking at one time.
Are all connected. And I was about to say that there's actually a scene in Doctor Strange where the Ancient One actually pulls him through all these different multiverses. There's actually a scene where he doesn't know how to control his thoughts, and his hands start growing fingers out of him, and more hands, and hands start stacking up on him, so he finds himself pulled through his own eyeball. So that is a great scene to watch when it
Yeah, that's an excellent, another excellent visualization of everything that we're talking about is Doctor Strange. That was perfect, and that was also too a demonstration of how he transcended his physical incapabilities to still be able to do what he needed to do. So, it's several lessons in that as well. And a lot of these movies and things like that, they do a great job at being able to tangibly and pictorially represent these ideas that we, know to be true and we speak about, but don't necessarily have the visual, concrete example to be able to look at in the physical. So, we've identified a couple in Inception, Doctor Strange, uh, and then I'll share some other resources with you guys as well. But the book, The Safer Your Sarah, too. So yeah, I felt like that was a lot. But anybody
A
got
lot
any
of
questions, comments?
a lot of goodness. It reminds me of a challenge I took with myself as a kid because I had this reoccurring dream, and I believe dreams have, multiple purposes, but one of them to me has been serving as sort of a war room to conquer fears and, anxiety inducing situations. So I remember I used to have this reoccurring dream. And, one day I woke up, I was agitated by it and I was tired of it. So, I kind of knew how the dreams was unfolding every time I went into it. So I committed myself to take an alternate route in this dream. And I remember the day that I woke up and I had did that, I felt so empowered because I felt like I had control in this realm that, a lot of people feel helpless in. And, to speak to the point, like in that subconscious realm where, that dreams occur in, where time isn't really a matter, it's a great training tool, really to delve into that spirit realm. Just throwing it out there for people.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's great. And you know, outside of what you already stated, that's basically my understanding of why, or part of why we dream, is to conquer fear. Like you see things in your dream, and a lot of times it's, you kind of envision the worst case scenario in your dream, and that now prepares you to face those things in conscious reality or reality. So you dream about it first, and then, if you come across that thing, it won't be, the first time you see it. And that is also too, like, sometimes you experience deja vu is because you've seen it in a dream already. So, the subconscious is very, very, very powerful. And, you know, the idea is to be able to utilize it for our benefit. And that's part of what this whole thing is about, too. Any other questions, comments? All right, Emerson, you got the last one for us?
Yep. Said death and old age.
hmm Can you expound on why that would be a natural enemy?
Well, the thought of death might persuade us to do certain things, or the fact that that you're getting older, or the thought of getting older might persuade you to do certain things because you had this timeline in your head of it might ruin patience actually. Now that I'm thinking about it.
Anybody else have any thoughts as to why old age, death would be a natural enemy?
Yeah, I think it wants, our ego, like you said earlier, everything seems to be rooted in this ego concept. Our ego wants to fix us in time. It wants us, to halt the continuum of past, present, and future. And so we want to become, immortal in a degree that's not natural, that's not in tune with the natural progression of all things.
Both of those is excellent. Terry, you got anything else to add onto what they already said?
I was just gonna say it could play on the fear factor. You can be restricted and suppress a lot of things because of the fear of death or thinking you can't do certain things because you're aging. So it can kind of go both ways.
Mm. Like all of that everybody said. Um, Benjamin, you got anything for us? I'm not sure if you know where we are in the conversation.
In in terms of why death is one of the natural enemies.
Hmm.
Um, I feel like it definitely connects to
Or old
ego,
age, death in
death
old age.
or old age. I feel like it connects to ego because even myself, I find like I want to reach, I guess, my sense of perfection in time. Like I want to be as best as I can be, but it kind of takes away focus from the journey and from living in the moment and doing the actual best you can. Because if you're worrying about doing the best you can and you're not really maximizing what you can do, so I can kind of see how death or old age is a natural enemy when you think about it and internalize it like that.
Good. Yeah, all of that's good. All right. So death, old age, and I also put time as well. They all kind of go together. But all of those, death, old age, and time, they deteriorate and they create misery. This is the final and the cruelest enemy. It's undefeated. Our one hope for glory, our chance to manifest completeness in this journey and to push on through old age and resist the temptation to rest. And, as I was writing this, kind of just brought me present to, like, I'm sure most of you have this same experience, but, I also had this experience too. But as people get older, and specifically my grandmother, she came to a point where she said, I'm tired. And that's what normally happens a lot of times with, people when they get up in age. Like, they can't move as fast as they did. They can't think as sharp. They can't do the things that they used to, i.e., living in the past and not the present. And not saying that it's bad or wrong because I've never been in that situation in this particular life and incarnation to say, like, I wouldn't think the same thing if I was in their particular situation. But, um, that's a lot of times what happens is they say, I'm tired. And they have not overcome that want or need to rest and relax once they get to a certain point. And our grandmaster is a prime example. Like, he has a debilitating issue in that he has, level 4 Parkinson's, and they told him that he should be in a wheelchair and all of this kind of stuff. And he still gets around. His mind is sharper than any person's mind that I know of, and he still does what he does, even with Parkinson's. Still teaches mind blowing, lessons at a whisper. Like, he can't really talk above a whisper, but it's like, he hasn't lost anything, so to speak, in his quote unquote old age because he hasn't given into that will to rest. Like, he's still reaching completion and perfection. And so, that's part of how we overcome that particular enemy is pushing through. Um, Having fought through fear, seen through clarity, learned to wield power, we may feel we have achieved everything and choose to merely rest and retreat. And this brings me to a point. It's actually a saying in Buddhism, but they say Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. So that's the end of the four natural enemies. So questions, comments, anything about this, death, old age, anything about any of the prior three. And Benjamin, I'll share the recording with you so you can get everything that was said tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, I
I
just
don't
want to say
know
that
if
was
this.
pretty. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I don't know if this is related, but my what when you first said why we think that death and old age is one of our natural enemies, one thing that came to mind for me is a lot of people that I know or notice is that a lot of people who follow religion, so to speak, um, they live for the afterlife, or they live for creating this uh path in order to have a certain type of afterlife for themselves, as if we know where we're going. So I noticed that a lot of people don't actually live because they live in fear, and it's I think that it would be difficult for people to conquer fear or conquer any of these natural enemies, because a lot of them live their life for death. So they want a certain place, they want to get into heaven, or they want to be reincarnated depending on what they believe in. And they literally live their life in fear because they're worried or scared that certain decisions that they make will affect where they go once they pass on. So that's what resonated with me when I first heard about, or when you first brought up death and old age, and you know.
Yep. So another movie, The Book of Eli. Like, that's what it was all about, was getting that book in order to control the populace. So if you instill fear in people, then they regulate themselves because they have the programming. If I tell you that, for example, this is, non-religious, because I'm not sure who's religious and who's not, but superstition. So if I say a black cat crosses your path, it's going to give you bad luck. Now you're going to go any kind of way to avoid a black cat crossing your path. So in me putting the program into your mind, now I now control your actions without me having to be there. So in essence, I'm controlling you. And so that's a lot of what that stuff is just about control and manipulation, and ultimately, like you said, having people to live in fear. And if you have a population that's living in fear, um, your actions are going to be limited. You know, how do you face an opponent that doesn't fear death? All right, somebody else.
I think, fear, it causes unnatural movements, causes paralysis, rigid movements. And so when we operate like a lot of people do based on fear, we move and we might be disillusioned and think that those movements are actually walking us towards our destination, but we're just herking and jerking about.
Oh yeah, most definitely. And again, exactly what you said. to me, it's even more evident in knife attacks, but it's because of that fear and living in the future as to like, oh yeah, if I get stabbed, what it will feel like, do I have to go to the hospital, all of this kind of stuff, all of which does not exist, but you live in the future. So now it controls your movement in the present because you don't want to get stabbed, you don't want to have to go to the hospital, you don't want to have to face that pain, but in moving out of fear, it now increases your chances of getting stabbed. So it's better to just live in the present. So yeah,
Yeah.
basically exactly what you said. Go
Sorry,
ahead.
I didn't mean to cut you off. That last part you just said reminded me of the axiom from Saturday. The warrior is not concerned with self. I believe is that it? Um, to that degree, when you conquer these natural enemies, um, you really make them your friend, so to speak. Because if you conquer fear, you recognize there it's only false evidence appearing real. If you conquer clarity, you conquer the ego, and you go with the flow and recognize that the truth is not just you; it's a grand scheme of things, and so forth down the line. So in actuality, understanding these enemies and learning ways to conquer them really help you manifest and control your thoughts the way that you mentioned earlier. I'm sorry, I was kind of like thinking as I was talking.
No,
But
no
yeah, as
worries.
you
Yeah,
said,
that's
like
good.
the grand scheme of life is really like controlling your thoughts. So like when you really conquer those four enemies, you have it, so to speak.
But that was perfect. And the visual that I saw in my head as you were talking was the visual of the movie Avatar, not the last Airbender, but the Avatar, the blue Avatar. And you remember when he had to go and conquer his dragon so he could fly him. Like that's
Yes, I was
what
just
I
thinking
thought
that.
about.
Yeah,
Like he just kept throwing them off, and then once he actually conquered it, now he was able to use it for his benefit as opposed to the fight. So
exactly.
yeah, that's excellent, excellent observation and analysis.
Thank you, instructor.
Mhm.
When you conquer it, you literally move beyond it. I actually had an experience today at work where a coworker tore apart a pile of branches and there was a rattlesnake in it. So small you couldn't tell until it like coiled up and went to strike, but I didn't even give that fear any kind of consideration. Simply confirmed it was a rattlesnake and then used the rate to get it out of our work zone.
Oh yeah, that's definitely uh, overcoming fear and all of that stuff. Uh,
I kind of felt sorry for the little guy because we kind of tore his house apart. I was like, "Oh, sorry, buddy, but I got to get you
mm.
out of here so you don't hurt anybody."
Yep, yeah, that's great. A great recognition and realization too. That because that's a part of it, and we'll get into it when we get into right action and right livelihood. But just knowing that we exist as an interconnected relationship and not a hierarchy where man is on the top, ruling over everybody and everything else. And that was a perfect example. And I appreciate that it was you who saw him because a lot of people would have killed the rattlesnake. You know, um,
Yeah, I know
but
exactly what you mean. Actually, that was everybody kept asking me, "Did you kill it?" And I was like, "No, it wasn't even a threat."
yeah, that's great. All right, so it is 10:02. So in the spirit of integrity, I'll ask you all, did you want to go? This actually took a little bit longer than I anticipated, but did you want to go into the first in the eightfold path, or do we want to save that for next week? Okay. Well, you spoke first. So, well, in that case, I'm done. Instructor Nate, if you have anything, or if anybody else has anything to say, questions, comments, concerns, you can say that now. Otherwise, I'll see people on the floor or on the call next week.
The only thing I'd like to say is that I got electrocuted by 220 power lines yesterday, and I just couldn't help but not be there because I love teaching so much and I love you all. Quite a privilege and opportunity to be here and expand upon what we know. And it reminds me of something that the chief instructor said: when he lifts us up, he lifts himself up as well when he enlightens and, takes us further down the path. So I wanted to say it's an honor and a privilege to be here, and I wouldn't miss this for anything.
Appreciate
Word.
you.
Thank you, instructor.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're glad that you're here and safe and all of that. Not
yeah,
many
yeah.
people live through that.
That's very true, but thanks to personal will, I was actually able to channel it and create almost like a shield. And I actually didn't let that power become like a stopping point. I actually realized that, it goes so much further than me or anything I can do. And I love what the chief instructor used to say about how the discipline goes out like the branches of a tree in all directions and goes on forever. No matter how far you get, there's always the next level. Always.
Excellent. Emerson, you had something?
Yeah, I was gonna say today in my biology class we had learned about waves again, and we was talking about the gamma, beta, and alpha waves, and how a particle from a gamma wave can be stopped by like a brick, and then beta even thinner of a sheet of paper, and then alpha even thinner sheet of paper, and then we had learned about like its actual sizes to waves, so like that put like what you said into perspective. So the shorter the waves is, they might get as small as like an atom, but the larger they get, it can be as big as like a radio tower. So I'm like, oh, like these are actual visible waves that we looking at. So I'm like, that's crazy, right? But then to finish it off, we was learning about the spectrum, and I seen that the colors on the spectrum bar had a line with the chakra colors too. So I'm like, man, this is crazy, bro. It's crazy.
Oh yeah, definitely. And that's the biggest piece of, why we teach principles and not technique. So when you teach principles, now those principles pervade over everything, everything that you learn, everything that you see, and they can be applied to everything. And so as you're seeing now, things that we learn in the dojo is not just, one dimensional, but it's multi-dimensional. And to me, that's one of the best things about this art is that it does transcend, through and pervade all of life. Is not just, oh yeah, let's come and kick and punch and hit the heavy bag and you know run in the circle and do push-ups, like all of that stuff is just so like mundane and like it's just, but the real crux and underlying foundation of this art is life itself. you know like that's why you can train 24 hours 7 days a week, because everything that you do is kempo. How you drink your glass of water is kempo. How you know open the door, how you drive, how you watch TV. It's like, so you train in everything that you do. It's not just when you enter the dojo and you going up and down the floor doing floor practice. It's in everything. And I'm glad that you are now seeing that. So the next step in becoming a walking, talking, living, breathing Kempo.
Facts, facts.
Anybody else? Questions, comments, concerns? All right. If nobody has nothing, I'll see you guys later, and I'll be sharing that recording as well. Peace, everybody.
Appreciate y'all.
Yeah.
Peace, everybody.
See y'all later.
And appreciate you all too.